Why was she still scrubbing dishes when she'd once commanded fire missions that turned the tide of battle? The question echoed in the fluorescent hum of the Fort Bragg dish room, bouncing between steel walls and her thoughts. 1830 hours. The day's last trays clattered into the sink, greasy and dull under the yellow light. Steam rose like fog from a world no one wanted to see. Staff Sergeant Alexis Stone kept her rhythm steady: wash, rinse, stack, repeat, her hands moving automatically, her eyes unfocused. The scars on her forearms caught the light like silver threads stitched by a cruel hand. 47 in total. She knew every one of them the way a cartographer knows the shape of a coastline. Every curve, every jagged edge, every story hidden beneath the surface. 12 from Mogadishu, shrapnel mostly. 8 from close quarters combat in Syria. 27 from classified operations that never happened. She didn't hide them anymore. There was no point. You can't erase a past like hers with long sleeves and regulation gloves. It seeps through. In the way you breathe. In the way you flinch when a tray drops too loud. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood at the end of the counter, pretending to check inventory. He was studying her arms again. His eyes lingered where the skin was roughest, where the scars crossed like intersecting rivers. He smirked: bar fights. Alexis didn't answer. Or let me guess, he continued, bad X happens more than people think. His voice carried that easy arrogance, the kind that comes from a man who's never been tested beyond paperwork and a raised voice. He pointed at a particularly nasty scar along her left forearm, a jagged lightning bolt of pale tissue. Rough childhood, huh? She didn't look up. She didn't even slow down. She had learned long ago that silence disarmed men like him more than any weapon could. But Webb wasn't comfortable with silence. He wanted submission, acknowledgement of proof that his words hit. I asked you a question, Stone. His tone sharpened. The dish room went quiet except for the hum of industrial fans. That was when things started to unravel. For 6 months, Alexis Stone had been invisible. Kitchen police duty KP, the punishment everyone dreaded. 14-hour shifts scrubbing pots, degreasing fryers, cleaning traps that smelled like death itself. No recognition. No rank here. Just sweat and soap and the echo of orders barked by men who didn't know her name beyond a line on the roster. She requested it, voluntarily. After 3 tours buried under classified ink, she needed quiet. No missions, no noise. Just something small, something human. Something that didn't require her to pull a trigger. But quiet doesn't mean peace. And peace isn't what she found here. Lieutenant Webb made sure of that. Stone, he called out during shift change that evening. The grease trap's backed up again. Guess whose job that is? The other soldiers groaned softly. Everyone knew what that meant. The grease pit was 3 feet deep, filled with thick sludge that could ruin a uniform and your appetite in seconds. Yes, sir, Alexis said quietly. Webb grinned, pleased by her lack of resistance. That's what I thought. Maybe next time you'll think twice before showing up looking like you lost a fight with a lawnmower. A few of the younger privates glanced away, uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Nobody ever did. She rolled her sleeves down and grabbed the maintenance tools from the closet. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She never did. Because explanation required honesty, and honesty meant breaking the silence that kept her sane. The maintenance pit was worse than usual. 3 feet deep in congealed fat and stinking water, the air was heavy with rot. Alexis climbed down, flashlight clenched between her teeth, wrench in hand. 40 minutes in, she'd cleared half the blockage. Sweat slicked her back. Her gloves were coated in black grease. The kind of labor no one ever imagined someone with 2 bronze stars doing. Webb appeared above her, peering down like a man admiring his own cruelty. You know, Stone, he said conversationally, I looked up your file. Logistics school, basic training, nothing special. How someone like you end up looking like that? She said nothing, her jaw tightened. Let me guess, Webb continued. Bad boyfriend, gang tattoos, you know the Army has standards, right? Private First Class Emma Torres, the youngest on the team, spoke hesitantly from the sink. Sir, maybe we should. Did I ask you private? Webb barked. Torres froze. Webb crouched near the edge of the pit, lowering his voice. I'm just saying, Stone. If you want to be taken seriously in this man's army, you might want to explain yourself. Right now, you look like trouble. Alexis finally looked up. Her gray eyes met his calm, unflinching, unreadable. Understood, sir. Webb smiled, satisfied with his victory. Good, finish up. I want this kitchen spotless by 2200. He left, his footsteps faded into the corridor. The only sound left was the soft drip of grease and her steady breathing. She reached for the final section of pipe, and her sleeve slid back. The scars glistened under the flashlight beam. Dozens of lines, some long, some short, some too deliberate to be accidents, and among them one mark that didn't fit. A tattoo etched beneath the scars. A raven in flight. Under it, in small Gothic script, Shadow 7. Torres, still nearby, noticed. Her voice was almost a whisper. Sergeant, is that just a tattoo? Alexis paused. It's complicated, she said softly. But in her mind, the world shifted. The smell of grease and metal faded, replaced by smoke, gunfire, the dry air of Somalia. Mogadishu, 2021. She was crouched behind crumbling concrete, her rifle pressed tight to her shoulder. The radio crackled. Shadow 7, we're pinned. Can you clear the south entrance? 12 hostiles, distance, less than 100 meters. Extraction, 15 minutes out. Her unit's shadow team, a covert branch of Delta Force, unacknowledged, disposable. She moved fast, silent. 3 targets down before they even turned. 2 more near the stairwell. The 6th caught her arm, a grenade shrapnel bursting through skin and bone. Scar number 19. Pain blurred her vision, but she kept moving. Pain was an old friend. By the time the helicopter arrived, 11 of her teammates were alive because of her. The 12th, Sergeant Miller, was. He'd bled out in her arms. His name was carved into her right forearm later, scar number 47, self-inflicted, on the flight home. A tribute, a wound she chose. She never spoke of it again. The sound of the pit returning to silence snapped her back. Grease trap, fluorescent lights, industrial cleaner. But the ghosts of Mogadishu still clung to her skin. By morning, the rumors had spread. Someone had seen the tattoo. Someone whispered Shadow 7 in the mess hall, half curious, half afraid. And then came the inspection. Uniform standards, Webb announced, standing before the assembled staff in the mess hall. His eyes, of course, found hers first. I've noticed some lapses, specifically visible scarring and unprofessional appearance. Every head turned toward her. Sergeant Stone, Webb said, step forward. She did, calmly, quietly. Show me your forearms. The air felt heavy. She hesitated, then rolled her sleeves. Gasps. Dozens of scars, each with surgical precision, shrapnel, burns, blade lines. A living map of places they'd never seen. Webb sneered. Exactly my point. This isn't a street gang, Stone. This is the United States Army. I don't care how you got those, but you'll cover them permanently if you want to stay in my kitchen. Sir, Torres started, the regulation says. I know what the regulation says, Private, Webb snapped. I'm giving a direct order. Alexis stood perfectly still. Her voice, when it came, was level. Yes, sir. The mess hall stayed quiet long after he dismissed them. Even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. That afternoon, everything changed. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop outside the mess hall. Government plates, tinted windows. The kind of vehicles that only appear when something important is about to happen. The doors opened. Out stepped Lieutenant General Patricia Cross, 3 silver stars gleaming on her shoulders. Behind her, 2 men in civilian clothes, but their bearing screamed Delta Force. Every soldier in the hall snapped to attention. General Cross walked straight toward Alexis. And then she smiled. "Shadow 7, she said quietly, "it's been a while." The room froze. Lieutenant Webb went pale. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "You don't understand," General Cross repeated, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Let me explain, Lieutenant. The woman you've been assigning grease-trap duty to, the one you said looked unprofessional, is Staff Sergeant Alexis Stone, call sign Shadow 7, Delta Force Combat Applications Group. 3 tour, 2 bronze stars, 1 silver star, 47 combat scars earned saving American lives in places you'll never hear about." The silence was absolute. Webb's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "But her file says logistics." "Her cover file," Cross said, "because her real record is classified. Shadow operators don't advertise their service, Lieutenant. They blend in. They stay quiet. They do the work no one else can." She stepped closer, her tone softening. "And for 6 months, you've been treating one of our nation's most elite warriors like garbage." Then she turned back to Alexis. "Shadow 7, she said formally, "your leave is over. We need you back." For the first time in months, Alexis allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, ma'am." They shook hands, not superior to subordinate, but warrior to warrior. And in that moment, the dish room, the scars, the silence, it all meant something again. General Cross faced the room. "Let this be a lesson," she said. "You never know who's standing next to you. Respect isn't about appearance. It's about recognizing sacrifice, the kind made when no one's watching." She glanced once more at Webb. "Carry on, Lieutenant, and learn that lesson quickly." 2 weeks later, Alexis Stone was gone, reassigned, destination unknown. Webb remained at Fort Bragg, but he changed. The arrogance dulled, the smirk disappeared. He spoke softer now, thought before he barked orders. Private Tours was promoted to shift supervisor. And on the wall near the dish pit, someone taped a small note. "Never underestimate the quiet ones." Beneath it, drawn in marker, was a raven, wings outstretched, flying free. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." What do you do when the quiet you begged for ends with a knock on your door? Fort Bragg, 200 hours. The barracks corridor was silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Alexis Stone sat on the edge of her bunk, boots laced, duffel packed, uniform crisp. She hadn't slept. She never did the night before a recall. Outside, the same black SUVs waited, no markings, no words. Just the low idle of engines and the faint pulse of headlights on wet asphalt. She stared at her reflection in the small barracks mirror. Same gray eyes, same pale lines across her forearms, but the woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd been washing dishes yesterday. "Shadow 7, she whispered to herself. The name felt foreign now, like a song from another lifetime. The door opened. A man stepped in, late 30s, sharp jaw, short-cropped hair, eyes like winter. Major Cole Vance, Delta Force, the kind of operator who didn't need introductions. "Stone," he said simply, "we move in 5. She nodded. No salute. Not here, not between ghosts of the same world. The convoy drove through the night. The rain fell in fine, relentless sheets, coating the world in gray. Alexis sat in the back seat, gloved hands resting on her knees. Across from her, Vance studied a file. He didn't speak. Neither did she. Finally, after an hour of silence, he closed it. "You've been off the grid a long time." 6 months. "Why the mess hall?" "I needed quiet." He half smiled. "You ever find it?" She looked out the window. "Not really." Vance nodded once, as if he understood, because he did. Men like him didn't need long explanations. Quiet wasn't peace for them. It was just an echo of the noise they couldn't forget. "General Cross says you're the only one who can do this," he said. Alexis raised an eyebrow. "That's what they always say." This time they mean it. By dawn, the convoy reached a fenced compound buried deep in North Carolina woods, the kind of place the Pentagon denied existed. Inside, floodlights cut through the fog. Soldiers in black fatigues moved with silent precision. No patches, no insignia. Vance led her inside. The air smelled of coffee, gun oil, and old secrets. They entered a briefing room, small, windowless, humming with tension. A digital map glowed across the far wall. General Cross was waiting. "Welcome back, Shadow 7, she said softly. Alexis stood at attention, silent. Cross gestured to the display. "This is what pulled you off leave." The map zoomed in on Tigray Province, northern Ethiopia. Satellite imagery, heat signatures, overlays of terrain. A convoy carrying experimental drone AI cores disappeared here, near the Eritrean border, Cross explained. The team guarding it went dark 72 hours ago. "Hostile territory?" Alexis asked. "Unclear," Cross said. "Satellite intercepts suggest a rogue paramilitary group, ex-Russian contractors, calling themselves Orion. They've been trying to sell advanced targeting tech on the black market. If they get these cores working, they could autonomously strike any signal anywhere." Vance stepped in. "We've identified a possible safe house outside Adigrat, minimal power signatures. The convoy's last beacon pinged within 2 clicks. Cross looked at Alexis. "We're sending a 4-man infiltration team. You'll lead." Alexis didn't blink. "My call sign." "Shadow 7, Cross said. "It's still yours if you'll take it." For a moment she said nothing. The memories of Mogadishu, of Miller dying in her arms, pressed down like a weight she thought she'd buried. Finally she nodded. "Then we're wheels up in 2 hours." Cross smiled faintly. "Good to have you back." The prep bay buzzed with quiet efficiency. Weapons checked, gear loaded, radios encrypted. Alexis went through her ritual in silence, checking each magazine, each blade, each strap. The motions were muscle memory, like prayer. Tor's voice flashed briefly in her head. "Is that just a tattoo?" She almost smiled. As she holstered her sidearm, Vance approached. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "Doesn't matter if I am," she said. "It's happening." "That's not an answer." "No," she said, "it's survival." Vance studied her, then nodded. "Your team waiting in Bay 3. She walked past him. Bay 3 held 3 others. Sergeant Malik Price, medic, calm, methodical, carried a dry humor that survived even under fire. Corporal Nina Cade, signals specialist, younger, sharp-tongued, hiding nerves behind sarcasm. And Staff Sergeant Harlow Dean, breacher, the kind of man whose silence spoke louder than most people's noise. Alexis stepped up. "Shadow team, listen up." They turned. She saw the flicker of recognition in Price's eyes, the quick glance between Cade and Dean. They'd all heard the rumors. "Extraction point is here," she said, pointing to the map projection on the wall. 2 clicks south of Adigrat. We drop low at 0300, move silent through village perimeter. Objective: locate Orion's safe house, secure AI cores, extract. We keep noise discipline. No civilian contact. In and out. Cade raised a hand. "Ma'am, intel says the area's crawling with Eritrean militia. What if Orion's paying them for cover?" Alexis met her gaze. "Then we'll move faster." Price smirked faintly. "You always this optimistic." "Only when it's life or death." Even Dean cracked a small grin. For the first time in months, Alexis felt something stir, not adrenaline exactly, but purpose. The rhythm she'd buried under dish soap and silence. The pulse of command. They flew out before sunrise. The MH-47 Chinook cut low across the Horn of Africa, rotors thundering against a blood-red dawn. Alexis sat by the open ramp, wind roaring past. The smell of dust and diesel filled her lungs. Below, endless ridges rolled toward the horizon, dry, scarred, beautiful. She stared down and thought of Miller, of the last time she'd seen a sunrise from a bird like this. Price nudged her boot. "You okay, boss?" She nodded, just thinking. "About the ones we didn't bring back." He gave a slow nod. "We all got ghosts." She looked out again. "Yeah, but some of them still bleed." 0300, drop zone cold. The team repelled into darkness. The air was dry, thin, full of the smell of sand and old stone. The moon hung low, silver against a sky full of dust. They moved fast, low to the ground. No comms chatter, only hand signals. The distant sound of goats whined through rusted tin roofs. A mile in, Cade froze. She tapped her headset, whispered, "Movement, heat signatures ahead, 3, no, 4, maybe armed." Alexis raised a fist. The team stopped. She peered through her scope, 4 men outside a mud-brick structure. AKs slung, cigarettes glowing. Local militia, maybe Orion sentries. Dean leaned close. "We can bypass left or drop them." "Negative," Alexis said. "No unnecessary noise, we bypass." They veered east, slipping through the ruins of an old schoolhouse. The chalkboard still held faint writing, ghost words of children long gone. The smell of old paper and dust mixed with the metallic taste of tension. Cade whispered, "You ever think about what we leave behind?" Alexis replied quietly, "Every day." 20 minutes later, they reached the perimeter of the safe house. A stone compound, 2 stories, minimal lights, 1 generator hum. Cade patched into thermal. 5 heat sources inside, 2 stationary, 3 mobile, 1's bigger, possibly armored. Price murmured, "That's not militia tech." Alexis scanned the entrance. "We breach low right side, non-lethal first, clear the top floor second." Dean nodded, priming the charge. "Ready. Go." The blast was small, precise, just enough to tear through the lock. Smoke, flashlight beams cutting through. They moved in perfect rhythm. Dean left, Price rear, Cade center. Alexis led. First contact. 2 targets down, tranquilizers, not bullets. Third target fired wild. She dropped him with a knee strike in silence. Top floor, a server array humming. Crates marked Aegis Core Beta. "Found it," Cade whispered. "Cores intact. Upload signatures match classified specs." Alexis moved closer, but then she saw it. A camera still recording. Someone knew they were here. Before she could speak, the wall behind them exploded. The blast threw her to the ground, ears ringing, dust cloud thick as fog. "Price," she shouted. "I'm good," he yelled. Dean groaned, pushing off debris. Ambush. Figures swarmed through the breach, 6, maybe 7, Orion operators in dark camo, faces masked. Alexis rolled behind a column, rifle up, short bursts. 1 hostile dropped, 2 more advancing. "Contact left," Cade shouted. "Fall back to stairwell," Alexis ordered. They moved, controlled, precise, but the opposition was organized. Military, not militia. A round grazed her shoulder, hot, sharp. She ignored it, firing 3 controlled shots. The room erupted in chaos, flashes, smoke, shouted commands in Russian. She felt the edge of something familiar, that thin line between life and death she hadn't crossed in months. And for the first time since Mogadishu, she felt alive. 5 minutes later, it was over. 6 Orion operators down. No friendlies lost. But the noise had drawn attention. They had minutes, maybe less, before more arrived. Cade secured the cores, got them. "Exfil to LZ Bravo," Alexis ordered. As they ran through the darkness, explosions echoed behind them, chain reactions. The safe house was burning. Dean grunted. Someone rigged failsafes. Keep moving. They sprinted through fields, breath harsh, boots sinking in sand. The night sky burned orange behind them. By the time they reached the LZ, the Chinook was already inbound. They loaded fast. As the bird lifted, Alexis looked back, flames devouring the safe house, smoke curling into the dawn. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just watched until the horizon swallowed it whole. Hours later, back at base, the debrief room was silent. Cross sat opposite her, expression unreadable. You recovered 2 cores, she said, not 3. Alexis frowned. There were only 2 crates. There should have been 3, Cross said. The third is missing. Vance added, Satellite picked up a small convoy heading north an hour before your breach. Whoever hit you knew you were coming. Alexis felt a chill. We were compromised. Cross nodded, and that means someone inside leaked it. The room fell quiet. Alexis's jaw tightened. Then find them. Cross met her eyes. I will, but for now, Shadow 7, you're not done. We just started. That night, Alexis sat alone in the dim barracks. Her shoulder throbbed, bandaged tight. Outside, rain began again, soft against the glass. She stared at her reflection, at the 47 scars that told stories no one else could read. And she whispered to herself, not as soldier or operative, but as a woman trying to remember why she'd ever believed peace was possible. Quiet never lasts. She looked down at her arm, the raven tattoo dark against pale skin. Shadow 7, she murmured, welcome back to the noise. Sometimes the war doesn't end when the guns go silent. It just changes its shape. How do you trust anyone when silence once saved your life? Fort Bragg, 4:30 hours. The rain hadn't stopped since the debrief. A steady, rhythmic tapping on the barracks roof, like a metronome counting down to something she couldn't see. Alexis Stone sat on her bunk again, same position, different war. Her hands rested on her knees, still and steady, though her mind was miles away, into gray, in the firelight, in the blast that wasn't supposed to happen. 1 crate missing. 1 convoy gone. Someone had known they were coming. And that meant one of their own had talked. The door opened. Major Cole Vance leaned in, his fatigue still damp from the rain. Morning, Stone. She glanced up, barely. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. General Cross wants you in ops in 10. She's bringing in counterintel. Alexis rubbed the back of her neck. So we're officially chasing ghosts now. Not ghosts, Vance said quietly. Traitors. He didn't stay for coffee. Didn't need to. The word lingered in the air long after he left. Ops was colder than usual. Lights dimmed low, screens glowing blue. General Cross stood at the center table, posture straight, expression carved in stone. Across from her was Lieutenant Colonel Noah Red, Counterintelligence Division, a man known for smiling rarely and suspecting often. Sergeant Stone, he greeted curtly, I've read your file. She smirked faintly. Which one? Cross allowed herself a flicker of amusement. Colonel Red will be leading the internal review. You'll assist. Alexis raised an eyebrow. You're pairing me with counterintel. You were on the ground when the breach happened, Cross said. You know what feels wrong, find it. Red slid a dossier across the table, 4 names printed cleanly on the front page. Everyone with clearance to the Ethiopia Op Manifest, he said. We'll start there. Alexis glanced at the list. Major Cole Vance, Logistics Officer Sarah Lynn, Communications Chief Petrov, and Technician First Class Arjun Malik. She looked up. That's it. For now, Red's tone was dry. We keep circles small. Cross added quietly, trust no one outside this room. Alexis nodded once, understood. The first interview was with Sarah Lynn, Logistics, a woman who'd been managing deployment routes for years, meticulous to the point of obsession. She sat upright in the glass-walled room, hands folded, eyes tired. "I sign every manifest that leaves this base," Lynn said evenly. "But I didn't leak anything. You can check my logs." "We already did," Red said. "Everything matches, but you signed off on the convoy's flight route 2 days before the breach. Anyone else see it?" Lynn hesitated. "Just the comms division. Petrov's team handles encryption for all outgoing signals." Alexis leaned forward. Was there anything off in the supply chain? A new vendor? A missing crate before departure? Lynn shook her head. Everything was standard, except... Except what? There was a replacement pilot on the outbound run. The original fell ill, sudden fever. They reassigned it without notice. Red jotted a note. Who authorized the change? Lynn hesitated again. Major Vance. The room went still. Alexis exchanged a look with Red, sharp, unreadable. After Lynn left, Red closed the folder. Your friend's name just came up. Alexis frowned. Cole wouldn't leak an op. He's been Delta longer than I have. Red shrugged. Experience doesn't equal loyalty. Everyone's got a reason. She didn't respond, but something twisted in her gut, the first hint of doubt. That night, she found Vance in the hangar bay, tightening a rotor bolt on one of the transports. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You think I did it," he said before she could speak. "I think your name. On a flight reassignment no one can explain." He wiped his hands on a rag, voice steady. "Pilot had malaria. We were short-staffed. I cleared it because waiting would have delayed the drop window. That's it." "You didn't tell Cross?" She didn't ask. Alexis folded her arms. "You know how that sounds." Vance looked up, his expression caught somewhere between anger and disappointment. "You think I'd sell out my own people?" "I think someone did," she said quietly, "and I'm supposed to find them." For a moment neither spoke. The sound of rain on metal filled the space. Vance finally said, "Be careful, Stone. When you start digging for traitors, you'll find pieces of yourself you don't like." By the third day, Alexis had gone through every file, every log, every security feed. Patterns emerged faint but there. The missing core wasn't random. Someone had erased specific timestamps from the shipment manifest, covering their tracks too neatly. Red pointed to the logs. "See here, every comms transfer goes through Petrov's encryption hub, but between 200 and 2:30 the night before the mission, nothing. A dead zone." Alexis frowned. "That's when the leak went out." Red nodded slowly. "Or when the leak was planted." They both knew what that meant. Communications Chief Viktor Petrov was ex-NSA, transferred to Special Operations 3 years prior. He was brilliant, temperamental, and thought rules were flexible suggestions. They found him in the comms bunker, half asleep over a terminal. He looked up, blinking. "Red, Stone, you look like bad news." Red didn't smile. "We're checking encryption logs from last week." Petrov yawned. "You mean the ones you wiped?" Alexis tilted her head. "We didn't wipe anything." Petrov frowned, sitting up. "Wait, the archive backups are gone." She caught the flicker of genuine confusion in his face. It wasn't an act. He tapped rapidly at the console, screens flashing. "No, no, no, someone ghosted the system. Hardware-level purge, not software." Red's jaw clenched. "Meaning?" "Meaning someone physically accessed the mainframe, used a clone drive." "Who else had that access?" Petrov glanced at the roster. "Only me, Red, Lynn, and Malik from Tech. He ran maintenance checks last week." Alexis and Red exchanged a glance. "Where is he now?" she asked. Petrov hesitated. "He took leave yesterday, family emergency, said he was heading to D.C." Red straightened. "No clearance for travel after an active breach." Petrov shrugged. "Guess he didn't wait for permission." 6 hours later, they were in the air again. Destination, Washington, D.C. Alexis sat beside Red, eyes fixed on the storm clouds beyond the porthole. She could feel the tension radiating off him, the kind that came from realizing the enemy wasn't a faceless militant halfway across the world. It was someone who shared your mess hall. Malik was part of maintenance, Red said, checking his tablet. He knew system architecture, could have cloned drives without raising alerts, but why leak to Orion? He's not a merc. Money, Alexis said, or fear people break for less. Red studied her. You've seen that before. She nodded slowly, too many times. He was quiet for a while. Then he asked softly, how many of your scars are from betrayal? She didn't answer. DC, 900 hours. They landed under civilian cover, driving an unmarked SUV through the gray morning haze. Traffic crawled along rain-soaked streets. Government buildings loomed like sleeping giants. Malik's last known address, a motel near Arlington, room 214. Red led, gun drawn but low. Alexis followed, weapon holstered but hand ready. They reached the door. Red knocked once. No answer. He kicked it in. The room was empty. No Malik, no luggage. But there was a laptop, screen cracked, still humming faintly. On the desk, a small raven feather, black, smooth, deliberate. Red frowned. He left a message. Alexis's pulse quickened. That's not for him. She moved closer, lifting the feather carefully. That's a shadow symbol. Our unit used to mark safe exfil points with them. So someone else was here. She nodded, and they knew I'd come. The laptop wasn't encrypted. That alone was strange. Petrov's code fragments flickered across the display. Someone had copied the missing logs and left them in plain sight. Red scrolled through lines of data. Coordinates, timestamps. This isn't a leak report. It's a trail, Alexis said. They want us to follow. Who? She hesitated. Someone who knows Shadow Protocol. Red stared at her. You think another Shadow operative's involved? Maybe. She glanced again at the feather, her gut tightening. The raven, her symbol, had become bait. By dusk, Intel confirmed Malik had boarded a private charter at Dulles 3 hours earlier. Destination unlisted. The tail number traced to an old logistics company, a shell front tied to Orion contracts. Red's voice was grim. He's running to them. Or being pulled, Alexis countered. If Orion got to him first, he's not the enemy, he's leverage. Red sighed. Then we find him before they break him. Alexis looked out the window at the fatting skyline. We will. Her voice was calm, but inside something darker moved, a recognition of the old rhythm, the hunt, the way war seeps into your bloodstream until peace feels unnatural. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of the safe house, the city lights flickering through the rain. Her shoulders still ached from the last mission. She unwrapped the bandage, tracing the wound with her fingers. Another scar to join the collection, another memory that would never fade. Red walked in quietly, 2 mugs in hand. You look like hell, he said. She half smiled. Feel worse. He handed her coffee, sat across from her. You ever get tired of being right? Constantly. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city below them. Finally, Red said, You think Malik's still alive? I think Orion doesn't waste assets. You're avoiding the question. She looked up. I think hope's a luxury we can't afford. Red leaned back, studying her. You ever wonder what you'd do if you weren't doing this? She didn't answer for a long time. Then softly, I'd wash dishes. He smiled faintly. Guess peace isn't about where you are, it's about who you are. Alexis looked out at the lights again. Maybe, but some of us were built for noise. At 300 hours, a transmission came through the secure line, scrambled, low frequency, origin unknown. Red patched it through. A voice crackled faintly. Shadow 7, if you're hearing this, they know who you are. Alexis froze. The voice was male, familiar, calm. She leaned closer. "Miller," she whispered, but he was dead. The voice continued, distorted. "It's not just Orion, it's deeper. Someone inside command, watch who you trust." Then static silence. Red stared at her. Who the hell was that? Alexis didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened. "A ghost," she said finally. She turned toward the window. The city lights flickered again, reflections like fires in the glass. Somewhere in that silence, she realized what the voice meant, that the traitor wasn't just a soldier gone rogue. It was something much worse. The betrayal reached higher. And this time, Shadow 7 wasn't just cleaning up someone else's mess. She was the target. Sometimes, the hardest enemy to fight is the one who used to wear your uniform. What if the warning came too late? The sun hadn't risen yet, but the air in the safe house was heavy, thick, with that kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Alexis Stone sat at the small metal table, the static from the transmission still echoing in her mind. They know who you are, the voice, the cadence, the calm under the chaos. It shouldn't be possible. Sergeant Miller was gone, dead in Mogadishu, buried with honors. But the recording, the tone, it was him, or someone who'd memorized his ghost. Red leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Could have been voice synthesis. Orion's got AI that mimics vocal patterns. Hell, I've heard ops where they resurrected voices from intercepted comms. Alexis rubbed her temples. No, the inflection, the phrase. Miller used to say it before we deployed, watch who you trust. It's not something you'd pull from a file. Red sighed. Then either he's alive or someone wants you to think he is. She didn't answer. The thought of Miller breathing somewhere out there, possibly in enemy hands, carved open something she'd tried to bury years ago. Guilt, sharp and raw. Red stepped closer. "We'll trace the signal origin. Low-band shortwave, unregistered. Whoever sent it wasn't trying to stay hidden. They wanted you to hear it." Alexis nodded slowly. "Then let's listen." 2 hours later, they were back in the operations hub. Screens flickered with coordinates, signal traces bouncing off old satellites like whispers in a storm. Petrov's algorithms worked overtime, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Got something," he said finally. "Pinged from an old relay tower outside Warsaw. Military-grade encryption, but outdated, something from the Shadow program era." Red frowned. "Warsaw, that's half a world from Orion's territory." Alexis's voice was quiet. "Not if it's bait." Cross joined them on screen, her image sharp, controlled. "Stone, Red, I'm authorizing off-record pursuit. Official channels are compromised until we isolate the mole. Your ghosts until further notice." "Meaning?" Red asked. "Meaning you don't exist," Cross said. "No backup, no extraction, you're on your own." Alexis nodded once, understood. Cross hesitated a moment, her tone softening. "Be careful, Shadow 7. If Miller's alive, it changes everything." The feed cut. Red muttered, "You ever notice how be careful always means you're walking into hell?" Alexis grabbed her gear. "Then let's make it a round trip." Warsaw, Poland. 48 hours later. Snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, blanketing the crumbling rooftops of an industrial district long forgotten by the modern world. The streets were quiet, neon signs flickering like dying memories. Alexis and Red moved through the shadows, civilian coats, unmarked weapons, no insignia. Ghosts among ghosts. The relay tower loomed ahead, skeletal and rusted. A faint hum of power vibrated through the air. Red checked his scanner. Signals live. Someone's broadcasting shortwave from inside. "Then we're not alone," Alexis whispered. They approached slow, methodical, every step deliberate. The snow muffled sound but amplified fear. Red covered the flank while Alexis slipped through a side door, weapon low. The air inside was cold, metallic, filled with dust. And then she saw it. A small radio unit, ancient but active. Beside it, a laptop. And beside that, a single photo. Her team, Shadow Unit Mogadishu 2021. All of them, including Miller. Her throat tightened. She reached for the photo and then a shadow moved. "Don't," a voice said. She spun, weapon raised. A man stood behind her, older, beard grayer, eyes familiar. Miller. Alive. For a long moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air felt too thick to trust. "Miller," she whispered. "How?" He gave a faint smile, tired, haunted. "Not here, not loud." Red entered behind her, gun half raised. "Who the hell?" Alexis raised a hand. "Stand down, he's one of ours." Red blinked. "The dead one." Miller exhaled. "Mostly." They relocated to an abandoned warehouse a few blocks away. Red kept his gun close, distrust written all over him. Alexis sat across from Miller, eyes never leaving his face. "You died," she said quietly. "I held you, I watched you stop breathing." "I know," he said softly, "and for what it's worth, I thought I was dead too." He explained in fragments. Orion had intercepted their exfil in Somalia, recovered him in critical condition. The official report said KIA, but in truth, he'd been taken, interrogated, reprogrammed in his words, used as a ghost for operations no one was supposed to know existed. "I escaped 2 months ago," he said. "Been trying to reach Cross, but comms were always blocked. Then I heard your call sign surface again. Figured if I used it, you'd come." Red paced behind them, skeptical. "Convenient story, you got proof." Miller tossed a drive onto the table. "Everything Orion's been building. Files, names, locations. You'll want to see who's bankrolling them." Red plugged it into his tablet. Lines of data filled the screen, contracts, encrypted transfers, names buried behind black budgets. And then he froze. "Jesus," he muttered. "This isn't just contractors. This goes up the chain. Someone in Command Operations North has been funneling intel straight to Orion." Alexis's jaw tightened. "Who?" Red scrolled, eyes widening. "Authorization tags match. Lieutenant General Patricia Cross." The room went dead silent. Miller's voice was almost a whisper. "That's why I couldn't go to her. She's not who she used to be." Alexis stood up, packing slowly. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "No," she said quietly. "That doesn't make sense. Cross brought me back. She gave us this op." Red shook his head. "Or she's cleaning her own tracks. If Orion's funding came from within, she's the only one high enough to bury the evidence." Miller looked at her. "You know her better than anyone. Could she do this?" Alexis closed her eyes. She remembered Cross's steady voice, the way she'd spoken to her in the mess hall, respect, pride, something almost maternal. But she also remembered the warning, "Trust no one outside this room." She opened her eyes. "We can't assume anything, not yet." Red said, "Then we get proof." They moved to a safe house outside Krakow, an old train depot converted into an ops base for off-record missions. Miller stayed hidden. His face on any feed would trigger too many alarms. For 3 days, they sifted through the stolen data. Money trails, call logs, intercepted communications. And buried inside, a pattern. Cross had personally authorized a series of logistics grants funneled through dummy corporations. The shell accounts all led to Orion Tactical Systems. It was airtight, too clean. Alexis stared at the screen long into the night. The weight of betrayal pressed on her like gravity. Could Cross really be feeding the same group that nearly killed her team? Miller spoke quietly from the shadows. "Sometimes leadership turns because they think the system's broken. They tell themselves the ends justify the means." She looked at him. "And you still believe in the system?" He hesitated. "I believe in the people beside me, always did." She nodded slowly. "That's enough." At dawn, Red burst into the room, face pale. "We've got company." Outside, black SUVs again, same type, same plates, the sound of boots on snow. Miller grabbed a rifle. "How did they find us?" Alexis cursed under her breath. "They traced the drive upload. We stayed connected too long." "Options?" Red asked. "Fight or vanish." She glanced at the exit. "Split up. Rendezvous at Checkpoint Delta, 24 hours, no comms." Red hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll draw them off." Before he could argue, she was gone, already moving through the side corridor, steps soft against the cold concrete. Snow whipped against her face as she crossed the alley. The SUVs screeched to a halt nearby, armed men spilling out, Orion unmistakable. She darted between buildings, ducked into an old factory. Footsteps followed. Her pulse slowed, calm now. She'd been here before, hunted, cornered, alive. She moved like water. One guard down, chokehold, silent. Another disarmed, rifle flipped, one clean strike. The third got lucky, bullet grazed her ribs. She bit back pain, fired once. He dropped. She kept moving until the echoes faded. Then she heard it, a voice on a nearby radio. "Command, this is Strike 1. Target confirmed. Authorization direct from Cross. Repeat, direct from Cross." Her stomach turned cold. There it was, confirmation. Cross had ordered the hit. She met Red again 12 hours later at a frozen train yard outside the city. He looked like he'd aged years in one day. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her side burned. "Mostly." He hesitated. "You heard the comms, didn't you?" She met his eyes. "Cross sent them." He swore under his breath. "Then we're burned. Every shadow protocol, every clearance. We're ghosts for real now." Miller stepped from the darkness. "Then we make it count." Alexis looked between them. One man who'd come back from the dead, another who still believed truth had a place in war. And her, the soldier who just learned her commander had betrayed everything she'd bled for. "We can expose her," Red said. "Go public, leak the files." Alexis shook her head. "No, that'll vanish in bureaucracy before it hits daylight. We need to show the truth, not tell it." "How?" Miller asked. "We get inside, find her, make her say it herself." Red frowned. "That's suicide." Alexis's voice was calm. "So was washing dishes in Fort Bragg while pretending the past was gone. This at least means something." That night, as the three of them sat in the freezing dark of the rail car, Alexis finally let herself feel it, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. She traced one of her scars with a gloved finger, the one from Mogadishu, the one Miller had seen before everything fell apart. She whispered, 47 scars. Thought that was all of them. Guess I was wrong." Miller looked up. "This one's invisible," he said quietly. She nodded, and deeper. Outside, the snow kept falling, slow and endless. Sometimes the hardest truth is that your enemy betrayed you. It's realizing they believed they were right. How do you face the person who made you believe in honor, and then use that belief to bury you? The cold inside the railcar was different from battlefield cold. It wasn't sharp, it was heavy, slow, the kind that crawled under your skin and stayed there. Alexis sat near the cracked window, the first gray light of dawn bleeding through. Red was across from her, half asleep, his hand still on the grip of his pistol. Miller stood near the doorway, watching the snow melt into slush between the rails. They hadn't spoken in hours. Words felt useless now. Each of them knew what they had to do. But Alexis's mind wouldn't stop replaying one face, Cross, the way she'd looked her in the eye when she said, "We need you back." The warmth in her voice, the trust. Now it all felt poisoned. Miller finally broke the silence. "If we go after her, there's no coming back." Alexis looked up. "We already crossed that line." Red opened one eye. "You two sound like you're planning a funeral." Miller gave a faint smile. Aren't we? No one answered. By afternoon, they were on the move again, driving through southern Germany in a stolen maintenance van. Miller's intel pointed them toward a NATO logistics hub outside Stuttgart, one of the few bases Cross still had under her purview. She's been using this site for private transfers, Miller explained, scrolling through data on his tablet. On paper, it's a drone repair depot. In reality, it's an intel laundering point. She moves tech and money through here before it disappears into Orion's hands. Red adjusted the map on the dashboard. So, we find proof inside. Proof won't matter unless we survive long enough to show it, Alexis said quietly. Red gave a grim nod. Then let's not die stupid. They reached the outskirts by midnight. The base sat under a blanket of fog, fences lined with motion sensors, watchtowers ghosted by light. Alexis crouched in the brush, night vision scanning the perimeter. 4 guards, rotating every 10 minutes. East sector's blind between cameras 22 and 24. Red grinned. You've done this before. She smirked faintly, once or twice. Miller prepped the EMP scrambler, attaching wires with the same care he'd once used loading explosives. This'll give us a 90-second blackout. That's all. Alexis nodded. 90 seconds is a lifetime if you move right. The gate went dark at 01, 12 hours. 3 shadows moved through the fog, silent, precise. They slipped inside the compound, hugging the concrete walls. A guard turned the corner, one hit to the neck, dropped before he could speak. Red dragged him behind a generator. Inside the operations hangar, fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Rows of containers stretched into the dark, labeled hydraulics, logistics, non-lethal payloads. Alexis moved between them, scanning each crate with her wrist monitor. Then she stopped. A single container marked property of Orion Systems, cleared by command authorization. She opened it. Inside, not weapons, drives, laptops, data cores, all tagged with the seal of the U.S. Department of Defense. Miller whistled low. She wasn't just selling intel, she was building something. Red frowned. Building what? Control, Alexis said. Orion's been using AI-driven drones. These cores are training modules, command override systems. She's giving them access to our battlefield architecture. Red cursed under his breath. So she's making them untouchable. Not if we pull this first, she said. Copy everything, leave nothing. They worked fast. Drives cloned, files encrypted. But just as they were finishing, the lights flickered, the power surge of a returning grid. EMP windows closing, Miller said. Then we're out, Alexis ordered. They moved toward the exit, but the corridor ahead flooded with light. Voices shouted, boots thundered. Hands where I can see them. They froze. At the far end stood a squad of armed soldiers, U.S. uniforms, not Orion. And in front of them, calm and deliberate, walked Lieutenant General Patricia Cross. She looked the same, controlled, composed. Her silver stars gleamed under the halogen lights. When she spoke, her voice was almost gentle. Shadow 7, you never could stay quiet, could you? Alexis didn't move. We found your playground, ma'am. Cross smiled faintly. You always were good at digging. Unfortunately, you were never very good at stopping. Red muttered, so it's true. Cross's gaze flicked toward him. Agent Red, always the skeptic, you should have stayed in counterintel where lies are easier to live with. Miller stepped forward slightly. Why, Patricia? His voice cracked on her name. You used to talk about integrity like it meant something. Cross's eyes softened just for a heartbeat. It still does. You think I sold out. You think I did this for money. No, I did it because I'm tired of sending good people into wars we can't win. Orion doesn't fight for politics. They fight for efficiency, for survival. We built a system that devours its own soldiers like you, Alexis. 47 scars, and for what? A mess hall job, a life spent forgotten. Alexis's jaw tightened. So your answer is to sell the system that broke you to the people trying to replace it. I'm not selling it, Cross said. I'm rewriting it. Her words echoed, heavy and certain. Alexis took a step closer. You sound just like every warlord who thought control was salvation. Cross's expression hardened. You don't see it yet. You've been conditioned to obey, not to question. I questioned every bullet I fired, Alexis said. That's why I can still sleep some nights. Silence. The two women stood face to face, soldier and commander, reflection and betrayal. Cross finally sighed. I'm giving you one chance, Stone. Walk away, go back to being invisible. This doesn't have to end badly. Alexis's eyes met hers. You already ended it. The gunfire started like thunder. Red dropped behind cover, returning fire. Miller took out the lights. Alexis dove left, firing controlled bursts. 2 guards down, 1 clipped. Cross moved fast, retreating behind a steel door as her soldiers laid suppressing fire. Go, Alexis shouted. They sprinted for the side exit, rounds tearing into the walls around them. Outside, snow whipped sideways in the floodlights. They dove behind a parked truck, breath heavy, adrenaline flooding their veins. Red checked his rifle. We're pinned. Miller slammed another mag in. They've got numbers. Alexis scanned the perimeter and saw it. A fuel truck 20 meters away. She met their eyes. We create distance. Red's eyes widened. You're not. But she already was. She sprinted across the open yard, bullets slicing past, reached the truck, ripped open the valve, fuel gushing onto the ground. She grabbed a flare from her belt. Stone, Red shouted. She tossed the flare. The explosion ripped the night open. Fire bloomed, blinding white and orange. The shockwave threw her backward. When she hit the ground, everything was ringing, muffled, distant. But through the haze, she saw them running toward her. Miller dragging her up, Red covering the retreat. They disappeared into the forest as alarms wailed behind them. They didn't stop running until dawn. The forest stretched endless gray trees, frozen ground, breath turning to steam. Red finally collapsed near a ridge, panting. Remind me never to let you plan the escape route again. Miller chuckled weakly. She doesn't plan, she improvises. Alexis sat against a fallen log, shoulder bleeding again, vision still ringing from the blast. We got what we came for. Red looked at her. And what exactly did we come for? We've got files that prove the highest-ranking general in Delta Force is working with a rogue organization. Who's going to believe us? Someone will, she said softly. They have to. Miller unzipped his pack, pulling out the data drives. Even if no one does, we still make sure the truth doesn't die with us. They built a transmitter out of scavenged parts, old radio guts, antenna wire, and the same kind of stubbornness that had kept them alive this long. The plan was simple. Broadcast the data packet to every unsecured frequency in the NATO spectrum. Flood the noise with truth. But simple plans are rarely clean. Halfway through setup, Miller's expression changed. He froze, eyes distant. Movement, he whispered. Alexis followed his gaze. Through the fog, silhouettes, 10, maybe more. Orion hunters. She looked at Red. You ready? He smirked, not even close. They opened fire before the enemy reached the tree line. Rounds tore through branches. The forest exploded with gunfire and echo. Miller covered the right flank, Red left. Alexis stayed near the transmitter, shielding it with her body as she patched the final wire. Signals live, she shouted. Keep them off me. Red grunted, firing, working on it. One Orion soldier broke through the brush, close enough for Alexis to see his eyes. She dropped him with 2 shots. Another came from the side. Miller tackled him, both crashing into the snow. A knife glinted, blood sprayed. Miller, she shouted. He didn't answer. She finished the upload, hitting send all. The transmitter sparked, then went silent. The noise of the gunfight slowed, fewer shots, more breathing. When the last echo died, the forest went still again. Red stumbled toward her, bleeding from a graze. "It's done. It's done." She turned toward where Miller had fallen. The snow was red where it shouldn't be. She knelt beside him. His eyes were half open, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. "Worth it," he whispered. She swallowed hard, every second. He nodded once, then went still. Red looked away, jaw tight. "We have to move." Alexis closed Miller's eyes, her hand trembling only once. "Yeah," she whispered, "we move." They reached a highway by noon, hitching a ride in the back of a cargo truck headed north. Red sat silent, one arm wrapped in bandages. Alexis stared out the small window at the gray sky. Somewhere the truth was spreading. Across servers, radios, networks, Cross's name attached to every file. By the time they reached the border, news feeds were already breaking. General under investigation for breach of military data integrity. Red exhaled slowly. "Guess it worked." Alexis nodded. "Truth always finds air." He looked at her. "What now?" She glanced at her scarred hands, the raven tattoo faint beneath the blood and dirt. "Now we disappear, again." Red smirked. "You think Cross will fall quietly?" "She won't," Alexis said, "but she'll fall." That night, as they camped by the roadside under a sky full of gray stars, Alexis sat awake long after Red slept. She traced her newest scar, a thin line just below her ribs, and thought of every face that had brought her here. Torres, Vance, Miller, Cross. All the names, all the losses, all the lessons. She whispered into the dark, "You never know who's standing next to you." And for the first time in years, her voice didn't shake. Sometimes the truth doesn't save you. It just refuses to die quietly. What happens when the truth finally sees daylight, but burns everyone it touches? 2 weeks after the broadcast, the world was on fire. News networks looped the same footage again and again. Grainy images of Cross leaving the Pentagon in silence, escorted by MPs. Statements of ongoing investigation. Speculation that would never come close to the real story. The files had detonated across every major system, every server that could hold a secret. But for Alexis Stone, none of it felt like victory. She and Red had vanished, living out of cheap hotels and border towns, changing names as easily as clothes. Their faces were on no wanted lists, but she knew better. The kind of people Cross had built relationships with didn't need warrants to pull triggers. It was late, a roadside motel in southern France. Rain again because it was always raining when she couldn't sleep. Alexis sat by the window, light from the neon vacancy sign painting her face in red and blue pulses. Red lay on the other bed, motionless, pretending to sleep. He finally said, without opening his eyes, "You should stop watching the news." "I'm not watching," she said. "Sure," he muttered. "You're listening to every word and rewriting every line in your head." She didn't deny it. The anchor's voice kept looping through static. "General Patricia Cross, charges under review, pending evidence verification. Public reaction divided." "Divided," Alexis whispered. "That's what they call it when no one wants to admit the system's broken." Red rolled over. "You expected applause." "No," she said quietly. "Just maybe acknowledgement for Miller, for all of them." He sat up, rubbing his face. "You blew open one of the deepest cover networks in military intelligence. You think they're gonna pin medals for that?" She gave a small, humorless laugh. "No, but sometimes you still hope." He looked at her for a long time. "You still believe in hope, huh?" She stared at the rain. "It's the only thing that hasn't shot at me yet." By morning, they were on the road again. An old Land Rover with cracked windows and no registration. They drove south toward the Pyrenees, keeping to back roads, avoiding cameras. The snow on the peaks looked clean from a distance, untouched by the wars below. Red handled navigation. We cross into Spain tonight. I've got a contact in Zaragoza, ex-CIA. He owes me a favor. Alexis nodded, eyes on the horizon. You trust him. I don't trust anyone, Red said, but I trust favors. People remember debts longer than friendships. Sometimes longer than loyalty, she murmured. At the border checkpoint, the guards barely looked up, just waved them through. But as they cleared the last gate, Red frowned. Something off. Alexis followed his gaze. A black sedan parked too perfectly beside the customs booth, windows tinted, no plates. She kept her voice calm. Eyes forward, don't react. They drove on. A minute later, the sedan pulled out behind them. Red swore softly, we've got company. Distance. 2 cars back, same speed. Let them follow, she said. They'll get nervous first. But the sedan didn't fall back. It matched every turn, every lane shift. The roads narrowed as they entered the foothills, and that's when the lights flashed, not police, something colder. The first shot hit the rear window. Down, Alexis shouted. Glass exploded. Red yanked the wheel hard, tires screaming against gravel. The Land Rover fishtailed, clipped a guardrail, and barreled down a narrow dirt track. More shots. Metal groaned. The sedan stayed close, its headlights cutting through the fog like eyes that wouldn't blink. Alexis leaned out the window, rifle up. One controlled burst. The front tire of the sedan blew. It spun, crashed against the rock wall, burst into smoke. Red didn't slow. You get them. Long enough, she said. They didn't stop until the valley swallowed the road, and the world went quiet again. They found shelter in an abandoned farmhouse overlooking the mountains. The air smelled of pine and rain-soaked earth. Red checked the fuel gauge, empty by morning. Alexis looked at the cracked roof, the peeling paint. Then morning better not find us here. He pulled a folded printout from his jacket, a digital copy of the data they'd leaked. You know what still doesn't make sense? Cross had resources, power. Why risk everything for Orion? Alexis sank onto a wooden chair. Maybe she thought control was safer in her hands. Red shook his head. She's not running anymore, Stone. She's rebuilding. You saw how fast they silenced the media. This thing isn't dead, it's regrouping. She stared at the floorboards. Then we finish it. He raised an eyebrow. You mean you finish it? She looked up. You're not coming. I didn't say that, he replied. But if we do this, it's not an op, it's suicide. Alexis gave a faint smile. I've done worse things to stay alive. The next evening, the sky broke open again, lightning crawling across clouds like veins. They made camp near an old watchtower overlooking the border road. Red worked on the comms rig while Alexis kept watch. She spotted something glinting on the ridge, a drone. Small, silent, too precise to be civilian. Red, she whispered, we've been tagged. He looked up. Can you jam it? Not before it sends position. They moved instantly, pack up, kill lights, head downhill. The rain came harder, wind howling through the valley. But by the time they reached the tree line, they heard the distant hum of engines. Multiple. Extraction team, Red muttered. Alexis stopped. No, they're not extracting. She pointed at the sky, black figures dropping fast, parachutes barely visible in the lightning flashes. She knew that formation. Delta Force. Cross had sent her own. They reached the forest floor just as the first shots cracked through the rain. Red ducked behind a boulder, returning fire. Friendly fire's not what it used to be. Alexis crawled beside him, soaked to the bone, vision blurred by water and smoke. They're not here to arrest. They're here to erase. Wonderful. The firefight raged through the night, muzzle flashes lighting the trees like brief suns. The air was thick with gunpowder and rain. At one point, Red went down, not dead but hit, bullet through the shoulder. Go, he shouted through gritted teeth. Not leaving you. He glared at her. You can't save the truth if you die holding me. She pressed her hand to his wound, tightening the bandage, then stopped bleeding so loud. He laughed, winced. God, you're terrible at comfort. Never practiced much. They kept moving, two shadows in a forest full of ghosts. By dawn, the shooting had stopped. The rain, too. Only smoke drifted between the trees, curling like memory. Red leaned against a tree, pale from blood loss. Alexis crouched beside him, scanning the ridge through her scope. They stopped chasing, he said weakly. No, she replied, they're waiting. For what? For her. And right then, through the fog, a single black helicopter descended. Cross stepped out. No soldiers this time, just her. She walked toward them slowly, coat whipping in the wind, boots sinking into the wet soil. Her face looked older, tired, but resolute. When she reached 20 paces, she stopped. Shadow 7, she called. You never were good at letting things end. Alexis rose to her feet, rifle steady. You sent men to kill us. I sent men to finish something you never understood. Enlighten me. Cross took a step closer. You exposed the network, congratulations, but you didn't destroy it. You think Orion needs me. They built their own command. You cut off a branch, not the root. Red coughed, struggling to stay upright. So you're just what, collateral? Cross ignored him. Her eyes were locked on Alexis. You could have joined me. You could have led. I wanted you to inherit this. I didn't want your empire, Alexis said. Then you'll die for theirs. Cross raised a pistol, sleek, black government tissue. The shot never came. Red fired first. One bullet sent her mass. Cross stumbled, eyes wide, not from pain but disbelief. She looked down at the wound blooming across her chest, then back at Alexis. Her voice was barely a whisper. You still don't understand. It was never about power. It was about survival. She collapsed. Alexis rushed forward, kneeling beside her. The old general's eyes were dimming, but there was no fear in them. You were my best, Cross whispered, the only one who still believed. I did, Alexis said softly, until you stopped deserving it. Cross's lips parted, maybe for a final word, but then she was gone. The rain started again, soft and cold. They buried her under the trees. No markers, no ceremony, just the sound of shovels in wet earth. When it was done, Red sank to the ground, exhausted. Now what? Alexis stared at the grave for a long time. Now we tell the truth, again. He laughed bitterly. To who? They'll erase her, same as they erased you. She looked at him, eyes steady. Then they'll have to keep erasing. Every time the truth surfaces, someone new will hear it. That's how rot dies, slow but certain. Red nodded weakly. You're bleeding again, he said. So are you. Fair trade. They found a small chapel down the valley that evening, half ruined, candles still burning in front of a cracked statue. Alexis washed her hands in the rainwater barrel outside, watching blood swirl into the mud. Inside, Red patched his arm with duct tape and gauze, muttering curses. She looked around the chapel, old wooden pews, bullet holes in the stained glass. Someone had scrawled words on the wall in fading chalk. Mercy isn't weakness. Alexis read it twice, then sat down, whispering under her breath, Tell that to the ones who didn't make it. Red joined her, sitting on the opposite pew. You ever think you'll stop? Stopping easy, she said. Living with it is. He chuckled softly. You sound like someone who's run out of wars. She glanced at him. No one ever runs out of wars. They just change uniforms. That night she dreamed again. The dish room, Fort Bragg. Steam rising from steel sinks, her reflection blurred by condensation. She heard Cross's voice, not angry, not commanding, gentle. You never know who's standing next to you. Then she saw Miller behind her in the reflection, smiling faintly. "You did good, Shadow 7, he said. When she turned around, the room was empty. She woke with tears she didn't remember earning. By dawn, Red was gone, left her a note on the altar. "Keep moving, don't look back. The world needs ghosts like you." She folded the note into her pocket. Outside, the first light hit the valley, turning the wet leaves silver. She should have felt peace, but peace was just another word people used when they didn't know what to call the silence after loss. She looked down at her arms, the scars, the raven tattoo. Each mark told a story, but none of them told the ending. She whispered 48. One for every lie she'd buried. Then she shouldered her pack, tightened her gloves, and walked toward the rising sun. Sometimes redemption isn't found in forgiveness. Sometimes it's found in refusing to forget. What do you become when the mission ends, but the war inside does? 3 months had passed since the valley, since Cross's last breath faded into the rain. The world had moved on, at least the part that liked to pretend things stayed clean once headlines cooled. Cross. Investigation had been quietly closed. Her name would live on a bronze plaque somewhere, sanitized and sealed. But not everything died in silence. Somewhere in the data she and Red had unleashed, fragments of Orion still pulsed, moving like veins through the black market, into governments, into corporations. You can't kill an idea with bullets, especially not one built on power. Alexis Stone learned that the hard way. She lived now in a port city on the Adriatic, where salt wind carried the smell of diesel and distance. Her hair was shorter, darker. The name on her passport read Evelyn Shaw, freelance security consultant. But no matter the alias, her scars still whispered the truth. She worked nights at a shipyard, routine, quiet, anonymous, guarding cargo she never asked about, watching lights flicker across the harbor. She'd thought invisibility would feel like freedom. It didn't. It felt like exile. Sometimes she'd wake to the sound of waves and think it was rotor blades. Sometimes she'd reach for a weapon that wasn't there. The body moves on. The mind takes longer. One night, as she made her rounds, a shadow detached itself from the dark. "Evening, Sergeant." Her pulse quickened. Only one man alive still called her that. Red stepped into the light, older, thinner, wearing civilian clothes that didn't fit his posture. His eyes held that same half-tired, half-defiant glint. "You're late," she said. He smiled faintly. "Didn't know I was expected." "You always are." They sat on the dock, legs dangling over black water. The city hummed behind them, laughter, traffic, the indifferent sound of life continuing. Red lit a cigarette, offered her one. She shook her head. "Never took you for a ghost who smokes," she said. "Never took you for one who stays still," he countered. "What happened to disappearing across continents?" "I did," she said. "But wherever I went, the same ghost showed up. Might as well stop running." He nodded, exhaling smoke into the cold air. "Orion's back." She didn't flinch. "I figured." He pulled a small drive from his pocket. "New name, same blood. They're calling themselves Helios Group now. Private defense contractor out of Ankara. New funding, new faces, same tech Cross built." "Who's behind it?" "That's the problem," Red said. "No one knows. The money trail vanishes into offshore grids, but there's chatter, field tests in Eastern Europe, autonomous targeting systems, same architecture you stole from Cross's base." Alexis looked out over the water. "So the truth we leaked just evolved." "Yeah, Hydra rule, cut off one head, get 3 more. Silence stretched. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. Finally she asked, "What do you need from me?" "Same thing I always did," he said. "The impossible." 2 nights later, they were on a freighter bound for Odessa. No mission briefings, no handlers, just 2 burned operatives with too many regrets and not enough time. Red spread a map on the metal table in their cabin. Helios runs a testing site near Mariupol's ruins, underground facility. Satellite shows power signatures consistent with active AI cores. They're trying to rebuild Orion's brain. Alexis studied the terrain lines. What's the objective? Proof, again. This time we bring the world to the crime scene before they can erase it. An extraction. He looked at her. We improvise. She smiled faintly. Some things never change. Odessa, midnight. The port was a graveyard of containers and broken cranes. They moved like shadows between rust and silence, guided only by the faint pulse of Red's tracker. Alexis felt the old rhythm return, the one she thought she'd buried under kitchen sinks and quiet mornings. Her breathing slowed. The noise in her head faded to focus. They found the convoy exactly where Intel said it would be, 3 trucks, no markings, escorted by 2 armored jeeps. Helios logo scrubbed, Red muttered, professional. Alexis watched through binoculars. They're moving cores, each crate's wired. Think they know we're coming. They always know, she said. When the convoy started rolling, they followed, keeping distance, headlights off. The road wound inland, through industrial outskirts and half-collapsed warehouses. Finally, the trucks turned into an old steel mill. Security gates rose. Guards in black gear scanned the perimeter. Red parked behind a pile of scrap metal. That's our rabbit hole. Alexis checked her weapon. Then let's fall in. Inside, the mill was hollowed into something unrecognizable. The ground floor had been converted into a command center, rows of terminals, generators humming beneath tarps. And in the center, suspended by cables and wires, a drone chassis the size of a car. Red whispered, they're programming it to select targets independently. Alexis's jaw tightened, Cross's vision perfected. They moved carefully through the catwalks above, collecting images, timestamps, proof. Then Red stopped. We've got a problem. Below, one of the guards was talking to a woman, blonde hair tied back, sharp eyes scanning the room. Alexis froze. She knew that face. Sarah Lynn, logistics officer, the one who'd claimed she knew nothing. Red cursed under his breath. She's alive. Alexis's voice was quiet, and she's the new Cross. They barely had time to react before an alarm screamed through the facility. Spotlights flared. Contact, a voice shouted in Russian. Red fired first. Chaos erupted, gunfire cracking through metal. Alexis dropped from the catwalk, rolled behind a generator and returned fire. Exit left, Red yelled. She covered him, taking down 2 guards before sprinting for the door. Lynn's voice echoed through the PA system, calm and cold. Shadow 7, she said, we've been waiting. Alexis froze mid-stride. You think you buried Orion, Lynn continued. You just cleared the path. Cross taught us how to hide. You taught us how to survive. Red grabbed her arm. Move. They burst through the loading bay, gunfire chasing them into the night. They ran until the world went quiet again, past the factories, through the marshland, into the skeleton of a bombed-out building. Red collapsed against a wall, panting. We can't keep doing this. Alexis checked the clip, reloaded, voice flat. We don't have a choice. He stared at her. Listen to yourself. Cross is dead, Miller's gone, Lynn's building another ghost army, and you're still running missions like the world's going to thank you for it. She looked at him, calm but hollow. The world doesn't have to thank me. It just has to exist tomorrow. Red's voice softened. You think that's redemption? She hesitated. No, it's survival. Later, when the adrenaline faded, they sat in what had once been an office. The walls were black with soot, the ceiling open to stars. Alexis cleaned her weapon with hands that didn't shake anymore. Red watched her. You ever wonder what happens when all the ghosts are gone, when there's no one left to fight? She smiled faintly. Then maybe I'll finally wash dishes again. He chuckled. You really think you could? I don't know, she said, but sometimes I miss the sound of running water. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that hurts because it remembers. By dawn, the building was silent again. Alexis sat by a broken window, watching the first light rise over the wrecked skyline. She pulled a small object from her pocket, the raven pin from her old uniform, black enamel cracked. She set it on the windowsill, whispered, "You keep finding me." Below, sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere, Lynn's soldiers would be regrouping. The war wasn't over. It never was. Red stirred behind her. They'll come again. I know. Then what's the plan? She turned, eyes calm. Same as always, we go where the noise is. He smiled, tired but resolute. Lead the way, Shadow 7. That night they boarded another freighter, this one bound for Istanbul. Rain streaked down the portholes like veins of light. Alexis stood on deck, wind in her hair, the sea black and endless. She thought about Cross, about Miller, about every person who'd believed in something enough to die for it. And she wondered if she'd crossed that line too, from soldier to echo, from human to function. She whispered into the wind, maybe we're all just missions that never end. Down below, Red was asleep against the bulkhead, his breathing steady for the first time in days. Alexis pulled the small radio from her pocket, the same model they'd used years ago in Mogadishu. She turned the dial slowly, letting static fill the air. And then faint, almost impossible, a voice. Shadow 7. She froze, the same calm tone, Miller's voice again. If you can hear this, they're building something bigger. Helios is just the beginning. Then static. Her hands trembled, but only slightly. She looked out at the horizon, where lightning danced over the sea. Then I'll end it, she said quietly, even if it ends me. Sometimes duty doesn't die with the war. It waits for the one strong enough to carry what's left. What do you do when every war you fought leaves you nothing left to protect but your own humanity? The ship cut through the black water like a wound across the sea. Alexis Stone stood on deck, hands gripping the rusted railing, wind tearing at her hair. Below, engines hummed a low dirge, steady, unrelenting like the pulse of memory. Red was below deck, rearming what little gear they still had. They were heading east, toward Istanbul, toward the coordinates Miller's final broadcast had hinted at. Helios wasn't hiding anymore. They were recruiting. And they were expecting her. They landed at dawn. The city was alive, loud, bright, full of contradictions. Street vendors shouted, ferries wailed across the Bosporus, the scent of diesel and bread mixing with the morning air. Alexis wore plain clothes, a hood pulled low. She moved through the crowds like a ghost, unseen, unnoticed, the way she'd learned long ago. Red joined her near a cafe overlooking the water. He slid a small dossier across the table. Helios headquarters, he said. Not a base, a business tower. Private security front called Erivos Technologies. Top floors sealed. AI development lab below. If Miller's message was right, they're prepping the first autonomous deployment tonight. Target, she asked. Prototype drone swarm, citywide test. They call it Project Dawn. She stared at the skyline, glass towers rising above centuries-old rooftops. They're going to show the world what happens when war no longer needs people. Red nodded, and they'll sell it to anyone who can pay. Alexis finished her coffee, stood and said softly, then let's ruin their sunrise. They watched the tower all afternoon, mapping guard patterns, camera sweeps, timing shifts. At 2300 hours they moved. The service elevator was old, slower than breathing. Alexis felt every floor slide past, every heartbeat louder than the next. Red checked his pistol, feels like old times. She smirked faintly, except now were the ghosts haunting the machine. The doors opened to the top floor lobby, glass walls, marble floors, silence so clean it hurt. A voice drifted from the far side. Shadow 7. Sarah Lynn stepped into view, dressed not in uniform but in a tailored suit. Her expression was calm, almost kind. I wondered how long it would take you. Alexis raised her weapon. Call off the test. Lynn shook her head. You still think in small circles, one mission, one enemy, one savior. Helios isn't an army, Alexis. It's evolution. You can't stop it. Then I'll die trying. Lynn smiled sadly. That's what Cross said before she understood. The air between them thickened. History and grief and something close to pity. Then Lynn gestured toward the glass wall. Below, on massive screens, countdown numbers flashed. 00, 14, 22. Project Dawn, she said. When that hits 0, every drone under Helios control will activate. Target protocols already loaded. Red moved behind a console, typing fast. I can jam the uplink for maybe 3 minutes. After that, they adapt. Alexis stepped closer to Lynn. Tell me why, after everything Cross did, after everything you saw. Lynn's eyes glistened. Because I believed her, because she was right. Humanity can't be trusted with its own conscience. Machines don't hesitate, they don't mourn. And they don't forgive, Alexis said quietly, which means they'll never stop. Lynn looked almost tender. Neither did you. The words hit like a blade. Before Alexis could reply, Lynn drew her sidearm and fired. The bullet grazed Alexis's shoulder, spinning her backward. Red returned fire 2 shots. Lynn staggered, hit the glass wall. It spiderwebbed behind her but didn't shatter. She smiled through blood. See, the same pattern, violence, always violence. Alexis aimed again, but Lynn holstered her weapon, raised her hands. Go ahead, finish it, but you'll prove me right. For a long moment, no one moved. The countdown kept ticking. Then Alexis lowered the gun. You're not worth another ghost. She turned toward Red. Cut the feed. Working on it. The lights flickered, alarms wailed. The console locked. Lines of code filled the screen's autonomous override. Lynn laughed softly. They're learning. Alexis slammed her palm onto the emergency controls. Manual access. Where's the main server? Red pointed toward the sealed lab below. Sublevel 3, you'll need a key. Lynn, still bleeding, held up a security card. You'll never make it in time. Alexis snatched it from her hand. Watch me. The stairwell felt endless, metal echoing under her boots, sirens screaming above. Red followed, clutching his side. 10 minutes. They burst into Sublevel 3, a cathedral of steel and light. Servers lined the walls like silent witnesses. In the center, a circular console surrounded by suspended drones, each one sleek, black, pulsing with red light. Alexis ran to the core. Find the control nexus. Red scanned the feed. Here, central column. She ripped open the panel, sparks flying. If we fry the link, we stop the launch. Or blow the whole building. Then at least it'll end. She crossed 2 wires, reversed the charge. The lights flickered. The drones twitched like insects waking from sleep. 5 minutes, Red shouted. The building trembled. Somewhere above, glass shattered. Alexis shouted over the roar. When I cut the mainline, you pull the breaker. He shook his head. We both go. No, she said firmly. If one of us stays, the other walks away. Not happening. She met his eyes. Red, please. For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes bright with something between anger and understanding. She turned back to the panel. The hum grew louder. Sparks leapt from the servers. She reached in, grabbed the live cable and jammed it into the power core. Light exploded. The drones screamed a chorus of metal agony, then fell silent, one by one. Fire rolled across the ceiling. Alarms died. The countdown froze at 00:00:07. When the smoke cleared, Alexis was still standing barely. The skin on her arms blistered, blood running down to her fingertips. Red ran to her, coughing. "You did it, they're dead." She shook her head weakly. "No, just sleeping." He pulled her toward the stairs. "We have to go." They stumbled upward as the tower burned. The night outside was red, sirens wailing, people screaming on the streets below. They reached the roof just as the first explosion ripped through the floors beneath. The blast waved through them both to the ground. Debris rained like meteors. Red dragged her to the helipad edge. "Jump." She looked down, the water far below, black and cold. "Red." He smiled faintly. "Ghosts don't drown." They jumped. When she woke, she was on the shore. The city was burning behind her, flames reflecting off the waves. Red lay a few feet away, coughing seawater, alive but barely. He rolled onto his back, laughing weakly. "You and your fireworks." She stared at the fire consuming the skyline. "It's over." "Until it isn't," he said. She nodded slowly. "Until it is." They vanished again, through borders, through names, through time. Weeks became months. The world rebuilt what it understood and buried what it didn't. Helios vanished from headlines, absorbed by another shell company. But fragments of code resurfaced, whispers of drones seen over conflict zones, unmarked, unclaimed. Red followed the trails, hunting ghosts. Alexis stopped. She found herself back where it had all begun, Fort Bragg, though the nameplate now read Pope Army Airfield. She sat at the same sink where once she'd washed dishes, the stainless steel gleaming under fluorescent light. A young private entered, startled to see her there. "Ma'am, you lost." She smiled faintly, something like that. He noticed the scars on her arms. "You get those in combat." She looked at them, old, faded, but still there. "Yeah," she said softly, "all of them." He hesitated. Must have been one hell of a story. She picked up a dishcloth, began scrubbing the sink. "It was." He lingered. "You ever tell it?" She shook her head. "Some stories aren't meant to be told, just remembered." He nodded awkwardly and left. For a long moment, she stood alone, hands in warm water, steam rising around her like ghosts of old battles. Then she whispered, 49. A new scar, invisible this time, the one you earn when you finally stop fighting. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. Somewhere far away, the world kept spinning, indifferent, alive. Red's last message came weeks later, a single encrypted line. "Still chasing noise, hope you found quiet." She smiled, folded the paper, slipped it into her pocket. Then she walked out into the daylight, not a soldier, not a ghost, just a woman who'd finally learned that strength isn't in the war you fight, but in the peace you choose. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, like the sound of water over steel. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.